right, sweet. Do you want to kick off, man?
Sure. So, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk with Mariano Conti of MakerDAO. He is the Oracle Wizard, as I like to call him. So maybe you'd like
That's
to.
official role at MakerDAO, Oracle Wizard extraordinaire.
Uh, so yeah, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself by the title that you like to use for yourself, Mariano.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the intro. So yeah, my name is Mariano Conti from Maker. I'm the head of smart contracts, actually.
Okay.
Uh, the uh, the oracles, I did create the first version of Maker's oracles that we still use to this day, and I've been very involved with the upcoming version 2 that is gonna come up with multi-collateral DAI.
Okay.
But that has been in partnership with somebody else from Maker. So I'm officially not the head of oracles anymore, but
Oh, I see.
I still,
Co-wizardry at this
yeah,
point.
I still enjoy the title.
Very
And
good.
I've been with the project for almost 3 years. So one of the older members of the project now.
Okay.
And yeah, I've seen DAI go through the alpha, the beta, which is what we have now. And hopefully multi-collateral DAI very soon.
Sure.
I saw yesterday on We Trust there's a pool started to get DAI released by the end of the month. Is that even possible? The multi-collateral?
I saw that, and I saw it when it was created, and yeah, unfortunately, no, we're not gonna be able to get it done by then.
There you go. Fair enough.
So when I first got into crypto and I heard about oracles, all I could think of was that character from The Matrix that like told the future, I think was her job.
Yeah.
She would like tell people what they needed to hear to fulfill their fate. So just in case some of the people watching here don't know what an oracle is, would you mind if you had to kind of explain it to a family member who was not technically inclined, how do you describe that? Or maybe just your role now as smart contracts?
Yeah, in the case of oracles, blockchains are closed systems. They know nothing about the outside world. So we call oracle anything that can get a piece of data from the outside world into the system. In the case of Maker, this is pretty much prices of assets. So the price of other cryptos, be it Ether, MKR, and eventually others. But an oracle can be anything. It can be weather data. It can be I don't know, search data. It could be whatever. And some people, there is like a slight distinction. Some people refer to oracle almost as the data itself. Some people refer to it as the smart contract that provides it. Some people include the tooling behind it to get the data into the smart contract, because there are
Okay.
many ways to do it, and you can try to be as decentralized as possible. So there are many ways to do it, but it like there's a lot of stuff that goes into what I define as an oracle.
Okay. Nice.
The other you mentioned my role. Smart contracts. Our team is the one that builds or helps build, along with a couple of other teams, peripheral to Maker, because there are way too many smart contracts. We build, test, and deploy everything that comprises the DAI credit system and the upcoming multi-collateral DAI. So, and last week, we all went to Berlin to a formal verification workshop to hone our skills with formal verification, which is kind of a fancy way of expressing your code in a mathematical way so you can prove that what you've written does exactly what you want it to do and nothing more, which is something that's been catching on, and it can either supersede security audits and stuff like that, which we will, of course, still have, right? But our plan is to not deploy anything to mainnet from now on if it's not 100% formally verified.
So does that mean you could use the word like unhackable? Or is that tempting fate?
It is tempting fate because even formal verification with everything good that it gives you is still only as good as the specs that you write.
Okay.
And the tools that you use. So even though the tools, are incredible, the specs are still written by humans, right?
Mhm.
So if you have a problem with your spec, you may see that the formal verification passes because you wrote it wrong, and even though it's right, it's proving something that is not true, right?
I see.
So
Okay.
I wouldn't say 100%, but we're whittling down the margin of error for our secure systems, like more and more and more as time goes by.
Great. Sounds like a nice step up from just smart contract auditing, like an added layer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mariano, I know a lot of people listening to this, like there's a full range of people listening to this from DeFi founders through to DeFi complete newbies who are interested and curious in the space. I've heard DAI described so many different ways, and I'm sure you've heard it described a multitude of ways too. Is there a couple of different simple explanations or metaphors or anything that you've heard, cool ways you've seen others explain it in your time out there in the space?
Yeah, and every time I describe it somewhat differently. There's a few that I've heard that I like. One is that DAI is money using new technology, but with old ideas. So, the gold standard, for example. These are ideas that are pretty old, and we're just using new technology on them. So it used to be that there was a certain amount of gold in a vault, and each dollar would be a claim to an amount of that gold. That's pretty much what DAI is. It's an asset-backed cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that for every DAI in circulation, there's always at least 150% worth of that value locked up in a smart contract. I've heard it described as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. What was it from the Bitcoin paper? That tends to trigger some people. But it's true, at least in the blockchain bubble circle that we live in. You're seeing more and more that almost every system uses DAI as a medium of exchange. You get like a new wallets use it, games use it. People are getting paid their salaries in it. And when you go to conferences, sometimes, because you go to places, you go to the US, you go to Europe, you go to Asia, people sometimes don't even say, they express value in DAI. So I think
awesome.
any one of those would work as a description. The one that I like the most is just like a asset-backed hard currency in the digital world.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. The sort of like follow-up question I have to that is that was really well explained, super simple, and I think for anyone learning about DAI for the first time, it's good to hear a simple, clear explanation. Do you have a follow-up, simple, clear explanation? Do I dare for CDPs? Like, is there an equivalent metaphor or simple explanation you've had of that or heard of that?
A little bit. So a CDP is somewhat analogous to a mortgage. So you go to a bank and you have a valuable asset, which in this case is your house, and you want to get a loan. And the bank prices your house at whatever, and then gives you, of course, a lower amount, right? Because they need to have a buffer in case. So let's say you put your house up a mortgage and you get money, and then the price, the housing prices, they go down, and then you cannot afford to pay your mortgage, and the bank takes your house. This is somewhat similar to a CDP. A CDP is, there is no bank, there's only the smart contracts, so it is decentralized, and you're essentially getting a loan from yourself. Your house in this case is Ether, which is valuable, and we know how much it costs, for example, in terms of US dollars. And since the DAI is pegged to a US dollar, we can do the calculation. And in a CDP, you lock up Ether, but this Ether is still yours. It's this is non-custodial. It hasn't changed hands. It's like kept for you in the system, in the smart contract, and you can borrow DAI against this Ether. And of course, you cannot borrow more than what you put in. You also need to have a buffer. And then the thing with the Ether is that its price fluctuates. It can go up, it can go down. If your asset, if Ether goes up, then you can borrow more with it. And if it goes down, you need to be careful to either pay back your debt or a part of it to always stay above a ratio. And so that's essentially a CDP. And foreclosure, in this case, would be liquidation. Once the system detects that your debt is underwater, so there's not enough collateral to backing it, then that's when liquidations happen and you lose some of the collateral that you put in. So I would say it's either analogous to a mortgage, or some people say to like a decentralized pawn shop, but you're the guy going in and you're also the guy receiving it. It's like, because that's one thing that I like when they say that you take a loan from yourself. That's, I believe it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of that specific angle before, the part that you're sort of taking a loan from yourself because you still own the underlying Ethereum in that case.
Yeah. I have just one last question on this, and then Clayton, you've got a couple of questions. But the CDP, like obviously that foreclosure level is something that people need to keep an eye on. And someone, just for those listening who don't know, the reason why you might want to lend against yourself is you might want to do what's called a leveraged long against Ethereum. You might be very bullish on where Ethereum price is going, and you might want to pull the DAI out and then buy more ETH, and that's quite a typical CDP behavior, I believe. You know a lot of tools and things in the space, Mariano. Are you seeing any indicators or tools that people can plug into their CDPs so they can get notified when levels are getting low? What does that look like, that foreclosure levels when they're approaching that? Is there anything cool in the space to support people so that they don't get hurt? Yes,
there are, and more are coming out. We see a lot of those at hackathons, but they're not too many actually become products. I'm trying to think. There's one called cdpsaver.com.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure how it works. I don't know if you need to put some Ether in the system and they will automatically use it, or if you authorize the system on some of your tokens and it will automatically pull from your account and put it into CDP, into your CDP once it's below a certain threshold. But it does something similar to that. And there's a few that I've seen, I don't know if they're in production yet, that try to balance your CDP somewhat. So if the price of your collateral is rising, then you can make rules. Let's say, okay, if Ether goes up this much and now I'm collateralized 300%, then take out some debt, some DAI debt, and leverage it a little bit. Or if the price of Ether goes down, then sell some of these assets for DAI and repay the debt. It's I've seen some of these rebalancers, but I don't know if they're out yet. Well, there is one similar that came out yesterday from the guys at Instadapp, which is amazing, the bridge between Maker and Compound. So you can move your, I believe you can move your DAI around, and you can like refinance your debt from one side to the other. I haven't used it yet. It's crazy, but you should check it out.
Awesome.
So let's see. People are using MakerDAO and the CDPs a lot to leverage on Ethereum. I guess I'm curious what you see as potential other use cases in the future, maybe as other collaterals are available on the system.
Yeah, we have data that I think leveraging and speculation are indeed the big use cases of CDPs, but you can use it for other things, and even with added collateral, it's going to be easier. But for example, let's say that you're not liquid and you need cash right now for something, and this is what happened. I mentioned this often. I wanted to buy a car last year around February 2018. I wanted to buy a car and I had Ether. I didn't have any cash, and I didn't want to sell my ETH just because the price was starting to drop. Well, maybe it was March. I don't remember. It was when the price of Ether was dropping, right? I needed cash, and I didn't want to sell my ETH. It's like I never want to sell my ETH. So I just put it into a CDP, and I took it alone and managed to buy the car after a week, and then I repaid my CDP over probably 2 or 3 months with my paycheck, right? So that's essentially the use case for just like somebody needing liquid cash, and that's really what DAI is. Also, I believe there's people who've paid for apartments with this kind of thing, for weddings. We have a lot of like DAI user stories. After that, then maybe if we get like digital gold in multi-collateral DAI, one of the tokens that we've announced is DGD.
Right.
So not DGX, which is the actual gold token, but DGD, which is the governance. But we'll see if the community feels like voting that one in. But that's one step closer to almost saying, hey, I've got gold, and I want to borrow against it. So
sure. Whereas now, if you have gold, it just, I mean, you could take it to a pawn shop, right? But you have to hand it over, and the rates would not be favorable. And it'd be quite a bit different.
Yeah, exactly.
So now that you've sort of segued to your story about getting the car, I wonder if you might fill people in a little bit about, so you receive a salary in DAI, as I understand, in Argentina. And you and I have talked about this a little bit. I wonder if you could fill people in about what the difference is between receiving and holding DAI versus if you were paid in pesos.
So if I was paid in pesos, the first thing to keep in mind is that we have around 50% inflation here in Argentina. So you need to be constantly fighting the system pretty much not to lose. Like a lot of people, they fight with the economy just to break even, right? And the point of the fact that you could make money out of whatever interests or investments, of course that exists, but it's not available to everybody, right? It's way too segregated for it, and a lot of people just, even if they're banked and they have somewhat good access to this kind of things, a lot of people don't either know about them or use them. So essentially in Argentina, what you do is when you get pesos, you try to buy dollars. That's what a lot of people do. They try to buy dollars, and then they you stash those dollars under the mattress or whatever you can, and so that's really ingrained in the mind of Argentinians here, right? Getting paid in DAI, first off, it solves that step right away. I'm getting paid in a much more stable currency. So I treat DAI as dollars. So for me, it's great getting paid in dollars. And then just the fact that I don't need to, the moment I receive my paycheck, I need to do something with it, like trade it. And 50% inflation is a lot, but my dad, for example, used to tell me about the times of hyperinflation when it was in the thousands, so somewhat like Venezuela-style inflation. And he would tell me how people would receive their paycheck on Friday and immediately go out and buy groceries, right? Like go to the whatever shops and buy food and whatever was needed, because the next day that money in your hand was going to be worth a lot less.
Sure.
So I know we're not at that level yet, but still 50% is a lot, right?
It's quite wild.
So just the fact that that I get paid, and now with all this second layer lending platforms, I can immediately start earning good interest on this DAI, right? I can loan it on Dharma, Compound, Nuo, DYDX. And if I do want to be a little more risky, I'm already being paid in an asset that's on the blockchain. So buying Ether or buying Bitcoin with it, it's really simple.
For sure. Yeah, I think that the benefit of receiving that currency that's already denominated in dollars like that is pretty huge. And I'm sure it's something that you hope to be able to share with other people that struggle with this as we carry on. I imagine that's part of your mission.
Yeah, exactly. It's I see a lot of people that could actually benefit from something like this.
For sure.
And there's stuff that they probably wouldn't even need to know that it's happening. Like if you have DAI, of course, you have to take some like risk into account. But I like to think that anybody who has DAI and it's not earning them interest, then they're losing money, right? So if you have DAI, it makes sense to put it in one of these platforms.
Sure.
And of course, Maker is going to come out with the DAI savings rate,
right?
Which, since it's tied to the system, is probably going to be just the safest. I cannot claim what the rates are going to be, but it is going to be a game changer, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as I understand, that's basically going to be returns that you'll receive merely for holding DAI. Is that an accurate way of saying that?
Yeah, pretty much. It's you do have to do one transaction on the blockchain, so you need to lock up this DAI into a smart contract.
Okay, gotcha.
But after that, anything that you have locked up in the smart contract is accruing interest per second.
I see. Nice.
Yeah, and this money comes out of the stability fee of the system. So whenever somebody borrows DAI from a CDP, when they pay back, they have to pay an interest on it, right? Sure. And this savings rate comes out of the stability fee that DAI creators pay.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, as well as the multi-collateral DAI. I think that's going to be a game changer for sure. Particularly as people that hold different assets are able to use the system, right? Because right now it's sort of limited to people that hold Ether. So I think that's going to be pretty big.
I do believe, and this is like my personal opinion, that Ether is always going to be the dominant collateral of the system, right? Just because the DAI credit system is built on Ethereum and,
Sure.
and Ether, a native token. But yeah, just being able to include different types of collateral. And for this first step, it's going to be mostly ERC20s, but there's work being done for in the future getting security tokens and other type of assets into the system that can essentially fulfill the promise of having uncorrelated assets inside multi-collateral DAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
For all the Bitcoin maximalists watching, don't worry, you can take a deep breath. WBTC will be available in the next iteration too.
I'm sure that's what they want.
Yeah, personally, I think WBTC is interesting. It's good enough for now. It doesn't have like a huge market cap, and
it did recently jump from 30 Bitcoin to 540 Bitcoin in the last few weeks.
Yeah,
to do a reasonable jump.
And I think it's gonna overtake, like, for example, Lightning Network, just in market cap. And people say that it's a custodian model, and it is, but I'm of the idea that we shouldn't shut things out just because they're not decentralized enough, or I think we can get there eventually, but I would love to see WBTC in there. And in fact, yesterday, the Maker Foundation came out with a blog post informing the community of how it can actually start conversations for getting other collaterals than the one that we announced into the system. So I am hoping that, because that was one of the most requested WBTC, I'm hoping the community will come together, because it's not just a matter of saying, hey, I want this one. There's a lot of risk involved, and a lot of studying that you have to do. It is non-trivial. And you also have the technical side as well.
Right. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think I covered the questions that I had. And I can't tell if Rossco is being very thoughtful or if his screen is frozen. I'm going to assume his screen's frozen for a second.
I think, yeah. I thought it was pensive as well.
Yeah, he's being very thoughtful about which things to collateralize. Well, yeah, thanks again for taking the time to meet with us. Is there anything else that you would like to share maybe before we close off, or do you think we covered everything?
No, I think we covered just about everything. I do feel that that is pretty much poised to become the currency that the blockchain world, at least the Ethereum world, thinks in, and just having additional tools, just having the ecosystem around it is what really makes it work. So
sure.
Anything that can help DAI, I think it's helping all of us. Yeah,
I agree. I'm a diehard all the way, big supporter. It's what really convinced me about the mainstream adoption potential of crypto. To be honest with you, I've been on the fence until I learned about DAI. So I'm with you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mariano.
Yep.
For sure. Thank you, guys.